G'day, it's Ben and Simon here from Pumped On Property, and in today's video we're going to talk about our favourite budgeting tips. So obviously over the years I've learned a huge amount about budgeting. I've gone out there and bought over 11 properties in the last 8 years, so budgeting has become a necessary evil in my life. So in today's video we're going to explain a little bit about some of the tips and tricks that we personally use to save for our next holidays, save for our next investment properties, save for that car that you're looking for, and really put those procedures into your life that make it so much easier to get to where you really want to be. So we're going to talk about why we hate budgeting, but it is a necessary evil. We're also going to talk a little bit about paying yourself first, understanding your expenses and how to actually reduce them systematically. Going to talk about having something that you're working towards, like that holiday or like that house, because it's a lot easier to be pulled towards something than to constantly be pushing towards something. And we're going to talk about 3 other things towards the second half of the video. So from my perspective, I just hate budgeting. I hate the budgeting word. I've never enjoyed doing it. It feels like it's taking something away from me, and when I feel like something's being taken away from me, even if it really wasn't there, I just have an issue with that for some reason.
For me, of course I don't love budgeting. I prefer to have that money in my account so I can enjoy and do some extra fun things, but I find it easy to budget because I understand my longer term goals and where I want to be in the future. So understanding that long-term goal and being able to go, all right, well, yeah, it's a little bit of a sacrifice right now, but hey, when I'm 45, 50 years of age, I'm never going to have to work again. Makes it a little bit easier personally.
I had this quote that I found when I was in year 12, because when I was in year 12, I was pretty much into a few things and none of them had anything to do with school. It was obviously about hanging out with my mates. I was into sports in a pretty big way, but I was lucky enough to read this little line in a newspaper that said if I went and applied to the university before even getting my HSC or OP for different states in Australia, they would actually, give me this interview, and if I passed the interview I could get into university without worrying about my marks. So my mum and I drove down to Wollongong University from Sydney, and we were lucky enough to sit down with this bloke and somehow managed to get myself into university about 6 months before the HSC even happened. A lot of people don't realise that that's something that you can actually do. I took my marks down, which were okay, but not good enough to get into the program that I wanted to get into. So it took a lot of the pressure off actually, worrying about what marks I got in my exams. But for some reason, once the pressure was off, I still wanted to do well and as good as I could do. So I got this little quote. I was searching online and it said, don't trade what you want most for what you want at the moment. And for me, during that time in my life, that sort of 6-month period where all I wanted to do was other stuff, those couple of days a week where I did go sit down and do what I needed to do to prepare for those exams, it really sort of put me in good stead. And I think that, not sacrificing what you want most for what you want at the moment is a big thing in the budgeting world. So let's talk a little bit about paying yourself first in this concept.
Sure, so really important aspect, and I'm not sure if you guys have read the book yet, called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Really interesting book. He provides his insights on investing and how to better your situation in the future. And one of the things that he focuses on is paying yourself first, and he talks about always putting that money into your bank account before you pay anything else. Before he paid his rent, before he paid any of his expenses, he'd always focus on paying himself first so he can acquire those assets and increase his longer term position.
And Robert Kiyosaki is a best-selling author. I think he owns something with his wife like 10,000 odd properties in America. He's got some very, very successful businesses. So that was a book that impacted me in a really positive way, and obviously Simon as well. But the concept's very simple. Let's say that you make $1,000 per week. Rather than paying for all of the fixed expenses in your life and all of the lifestyle related expenses that you give yourself each week, just pay yourself first. So my graduate salary at IBM in the first year, I think, was $55,000, and I just immediately started to pay myself first from my first paycheck, so I didn't even notice it. So at that point I'd moved back into home to save some money to buy some investment properties, and I think I was paying myself about $300 per week, which enabled me to save in a very, very quick period of time for that first property. And it can be as simple as that. Now, obviously some of us are coming into this in a position where they're not in the greatest state financially, and maybe your expenses outweigh your actual income. You've got to, you know, sit down with your partner or sit down on your own, create a list of expenses in a column, create a list of income in another column, and then work out ways that you can reduce that. And, you know, little tips like, you know, so simple. I've been on a phone plan with Telstra for the last couple of years, and I think it's about 99 bucks. Instead of upgrading my phone, I just kept my current phone and then downgraded to their unlimited plan, which is 27 bucks a month without the phone. So there's heaps of different ways that you can save money, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. But paying yourself first is the most important thing, whether you're paying yourself $1 or you're paying yourself thousands of dollars a week. So the second thing that we wanted to touch on is really understanding your expenses and how to reduce them. So let's talk about some common expenses, Simon, that you, as you know, somebody at an earlier stage of their journey have in your life, and then I'll talk about some of the ones from my perspective with 3 kids and school and all that stuff.
Yeah, for myself, it's a lot easier to manage my expenses because there isn't too much in my life at this point in time. I pay rent every single week, so I make sure that that goes out where it needs to go. I also had my dad purchase a car for me, so I'm paying him back a certain amount every single week. And understanding that, then I also like to pay myself a small amount of money. So every single week I put $100 into account for those other little things that come up. So any of your car bills, maybe going on a holiday, or any of those other little expenses that tend to pop up every 6 months or something like that, going to the dentist. So that accumulates over time, and I never have to go into my immediate paycheck just to pay for those things because I've always got a bit of a buffer there. So you know, it's very easy, just rent, small expenses such as your car, things like that, and then obviously the things that I need in my life like food and health and all those additional things as well. So it's nice and easy at my stage in my life, but I guess for you with a few kids and a number of properties, it's a different situation.
Yeah, so from my perspective, obviously 3 kids, sort of 33 years of age now, some businesses, and you know, some different expenses than I had back in the day. You know, I'm really looking down the barrel of sort of daycare costs, also looking at a couple of cars and maintaining those cars, obviously debt on my own home and the holding costs associated with that property, the extra out-of-pocket costs associated with the properties. Then there's all of the business related expenses. You know, so over time there's school fees, there's all of those other bits and pieces that creep up. These days I do have a gardener that comes around once a fortnight and helps out, and we do have a cleaner that comes around once a week as well to help out. Just because we do have 3 kids under 5.5 and it is a bit chaotic, and I want to spend my time doing this stuff, and my wife wants to spend her time, you know, trying not to have a mental breakdown. Sorry, Lise. But yeah, so like at different stages of our life, I suppose my expenses are as high as they're ever going to be because I've got kids in daycare and going into school and private school. You know, where Simon's at that really nice stage where his expenses are low, which means a good percentage of his disposable income can go into investing in property and holidaying and all that fun stuff. So it's important to understand the difference between the fixed expenses in your life and then the variable expenses, which are really the way that you want to spend your time. Now, I've always been a huge fan for traveling, for doing that fun stuff as well. I don't like sacrificing anything to get to my long-term goal in the short term, just in case something happens and you don't get there and your life's over. So you want to enjoy the journey, but you also can systematically work through that stuff. And it's as simple as like literally a couple of weeks back, I've got a bunch of different home loans with the 4 big lenders in Australia. I heard that interest rates had dropped a little bit for investors a couple of months ago, rang them all up, and I saved myself literally from that one call about 35 grand a year in interest just by saving myself 1% or 0.5% on each loan. So for those of you investors out there, that's a big opportunity. You know, saving yourself stuff like insurance on your properties, reducing the management fee on your properties now that they're working well. You know, just all of those little things, as my accountant says to me, like the more you earn, the more goes out the bottom. And it's important to make sure like you tighten up that bottom triangle like you did when you're on your way up on your journey as well. So understand those expenses, reduce them as much as possible. So let's talk a little bit now about having something to work towards and why that's so important for someone looking to budget and save.
For me, it's the most important thing to help me budget, to help me save, understanding the long-term goal, whether that be financial freedom in the future, working towards a property, working towards a number of properties to get to that point in the future, or something just like going on a weekend trip away, or maybe even going on an overseas holiday. So once you understand the long-term outcome that you're hoping to work towards, it makes it a lot easier to reduce those expenses in your life and increase that budget, because once you understand, oh cool, I've got a holiday coming up overseas in 3 months' time. I'm not going to go out for breakfast every single weekend. I'm not going to go out to dinner 2 times a week. I'm just going to do the things that I need to do at home and have a nice and simple lifestyle. And then when I go away, I'm going to indulge and I'm going to enjoy everything, all the sacrifices that I've made right now. Then when it comes to property, making sure that you're very strict with yourself and making sure that you're putting that cash away every single week and not touching it, keep increasing it as your income goes up, or as you either have, as your expenses come down, whatever it may be.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think that's an important one, because as your income increases, for anyone whose income has increased dramatically, you would know that your cost base seems to infinitely increase, so does your lifestyle. And so why that's important is to remember that, you know, just because you're earning more doesn't mean that what you're paying yourself when you're earning 50 grand is the same you're going to be paying yourself when you're earning $500,000 a year. And so you really need to continue to step that up each time you get a pay rise, each time you get a percentage of your money back at tax time because you've got investment properties, each time you get, you know, bonuses in your job or have a really strong month in your business. You know, you've got to continue to have that mindset of paying yourself first. I just have a dollar amount each week that I try and do that. So there's 2 things, I suppose, when we're talking about having something you're working towards. There's that long-term vision of how you want your life to be. And for all of us, regardless of what you tell yourself and the story in your mind, you want choices, and you want choices at an age where you can still enjoy them. So for me, that means time with my family, friends, doing things that I enjoy, health stuff, working in businesses that are meaningful for me and actually doing that stuff, and just really going through that motion of you know, the simple things like trying to be present in the day. So it's important that I know that that's where I want to be in the future, and I would like a couple $100 grand a year coming into my bank account, whether I get out of bed or not, or have businesses or don't. That's sort of the line in the sand that I'm working towards over the next 20 years. But there's also another important part to that, and that is what you want to achieve in the next 12 months. So I think setting goals any longer than 12 months for most people are completely unrealistic. You'll either get there a lot faster than you thought you would, or you'll set completely unrealistic goals for what you want to do in 3 years and not achieve anything. And so it's really important to know, you know, in my family life, I want to achieve this year. In my work life, I want to achieve this. In my personal development, I want to achieve this. In my health, I want to achieve that. And really just have those markers so that you're getting pulled towards where you want to be. If you know 12 months from now you want to buy a property, then you need to do something to achieve that. And it's much easier to go, well, the property's going to cost me $400K. The bank's going to want 10% of that, so $40,000. I know it's going to cost me about an extra 15 grand on top of that, so I need about 55K. Well, I've already got that money in equity in my property, but I'll continue to save anyway. Or alternatively, you know, I'm gonna have to save X amount of dollars per week for the X amount of months, years, whatever it's gonna take you to get to that point. But that line in the sand point is what separates people that get to financial freedom and people that just talk shit about it. So the 4th thing that we wanted to talk about in today's video is really knowing what you want long term, and that's a really difficult question for most people to answer. So what we're really referring to there is, you know, where you want to be in the future and the different aspects of your life. But what I think is important is how you've started to figure out those things in your life. You know, what have you been deciding, and how have you been figuring out what you really want?
Sure. So, bless you. Being quite young and having a lot of people around me that are pretty influential. My dad started his own business. My brother started his own business. I have a passion for business and starting different things, so I really want to look at how I can move out of having to work every single day and start focusing on different businesses and creating them, starting them from scratch and taking them to wherever they could possibly be. So that's one of the reasons that I started to get into property as well, because I understand that those assets over time are going to increase in value, and then when I own them outright, I'm going to have that passive income. So regardless of what I'm doing in my personal life, I still have an income that's coming in, so I can still go on holidays, focus on different businesses and not worry, and ensuring that I'm going to be able to send my kids to a good school and enjoy a happy lifestyle with my friends and family is really important. So it has been an interesting time for me over the last 12 months, going from university lifestyle into a full-time workplace and trying to figure out what I want to achieve longer term. But now that I understand exactly where I want to be, it makes it a lot easier to make these decisions now to help me get to that point in time. And it's a really exciting place that I'm at personally. And yeah, just really excited over the next 15 years to see what I can do with my situation and see how far I can actually take it, because I have a passion for helping people and trying to get them to be the best version of themselves, and I also want to try and be the best version of myself too. So figuring out that, and I guess that's why I've slid into this business quite well, because I get the opportunity to speak with 20 people every single week and talk with them about their plans, what they're already doing, what they're hoping to do in the future, and you know, doing that every single week, it makes it easier to look at my long-term goal as well. But in the beginning, when I first moved up to Queensland, it was really difficult to just go, hey, this is where I want to be in the future. But as I've matured and as I've grown as a human being, it has made it a lot easier to make those sorts of decisions and make the sacrifices today that are going to enable that in the future.
No, that's awesome, man. Like, I feel the same way from my perspective. So what I've done in my life, like, I didn't just wake up one day and go, oh my God, I've found my true calling and passion in life, which is property investment. Like, it's taken a long time to get to do what I love every single day in a way that actually really helps people, that I can wake up and go, man, I feel like proud about the work that we're doing. So for me, rather than, you know, obsessing about what I really wanted to do, I just tried heaps of different things. I think since the time I was 13, I've had something like 50 or 60 different part-time and full-time jobs. I've bought 11 properties. I've made some really good money on some of them. I've made some really big mistakes on others, which I've learnt from. You know, I've like done a fair bit of traveling, and I've lived with lots of different people and had lots of different mentors and experiences in my life, and kind of going down a path and going, I don't really like that, or that's not for me. But I did like this particular part of it, has enabled me to sort of stumble through and find my way. And I think a lot of people don't actually do enough of that. You know, when we're talking about budgeting and achieving your longer term goals, I think so many of us just get wrapped up in, I have to keep doing the same thing, I can't get outside of my box, or somebody in my life is telling me that I need to continue to do this, or I've got financial pressures, so that means I can't, you know, pivot like I used to. And you got to be really, really careful about that, because I think by not having at least some form of enjoyment in what you do, long term, I'm not talking about short term, because I know it takes time to find that, and a lot of people don't have that right now, but by finding that, the one thing it does is it enables you to work harder for longer in one area because you're passionate about it and you enjoy it than the average person. And if you do that over time, you get an opportunity to go further than the average person would. And you know, I've been in property now for the last 6 years non-stop. I've been investing for 8 years. It's been my literally obsession. Like, if I go away for 3 or 4 days, it's what I think about. And I've been lucky enough to turn it into a business where I get to work with my family and do this cool stuff and help people. But you know, if you knew the full backstory, it's like a hell of a journey to get to this point. And I don't think enough of us take that, you know, opportunity to think about what we really want to do, try a heap of stuff that we hate, and then realize, you know, when you find what you want, it is pretty freaking awesome to wake up and get to do that. So there's 2 other things I want to touch on really briefly. I'm going to talk about those a bit more. So the first is focusing on income or income producing assets as opposed to buying stuff or liabilities. Now, Robert Kiyosaki, as Simon said before, talks about this heaps in his Rich Dad Poor Dad book, but what we're really talking about here is, you know, don't go and buy the first car You know, I'm not talking about your average car like that we all need to get around. Like me and Simon both started off, well, Simon's got a nice car, but you know, he didn't spend $100,000 on this thing like a lot of other young people are going and doing. It's like a really nice car. I've got a nice car to just do what I need to do there. Geez, that sounds horrible, what I've just said. But let's get back to that. So what I'm saying is it's important to go out there and buy, you know, from my perspective, save first, buy assets first, and then come back to those things that you want, like those material things. I think I lived in something like 11 houses before my wife and I bought the house that we're going to spend the next 20 years in, and we leveraged off each of those opportunities to get to that point. So many people jump into, I want the car, I want the house, I want the lifestyle now, but they don't have the income or the passive income to support what they truly want long term, and that keeps them broke and it keeps them in the cycle, and it probably ends up meaning they're living off a little bit of super and then the pension, and that's really distressing to me to think about. You trade 40, 50 years of your life to end up on a government pension. It just really doesn't have to be that hard. So, you know, we've talked about this in our 2 Properties to Financial Freedom video, where, you know, you go out and buy a really nice home, you build a granny flat, go buy another really nice home, add a granny flat. You know, over a 15 to 20 year period, you pay off those assets, and in 15 to 20 years, those assets provide you with passive income for the rest of your life. And then after you've done that, then you get on the rest of your life. Or if you're starting at a point where you've already got a few properties, or you've got your own home, then that's your starting point, and you go and do the 2 property strategy from there. So, you know, don't jump that gun. Don't go and spend all your money on stuff that's gonna make you look really bad to the bank and inhibit your ability to continue to move forward. But also make sure you have the lifestyle on the way through as well. Lifestyle just doesn't have to mean, you know, you're losing money every single week to hold that lifestyle. The last one that I wanted to touch on is earning more. Now, that might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but regardless of where you're at in your life, there's opportunities to earn more money. You can have a base wage and then a part of your wage attached to commission or performance. And in almost every single job I've ever had, I've been able to negotiate that because I need something that I'm striving towards. You could start something smaller on the side, like I've done before. You could go and work another part-time job at night or something else or on the weekend, like I've also done before. Like whatever it takes to get yourself to that point where you can get into the marketplace, or you can get from where you are in the market and take advantage of conditions that are coming up over the next few years, which I think will be some of the best buying, at least in, you know, the cycles that I've been through so far. But you know, there's so many different ways to earn more. You just have to start thinking about how can I earn more, as opposed to it's daunting to think about earning more. And you can always jump businesses, you can always improve your skill set and earn more that way through education as well. So hope you've got a little bit of value out of today's video. This is our budgeting tips. I know we kind of went way off tangent with a lot of this stuff, but
sure it's going to happen.
There's only one thing that matters with budgeting, and that is paying yourself first. All of the other stuff is just fluff in comparison to that, and that's what all of the most successful investors of all time have always done. So thank you so much for your time, and until next time, thank you.
See you guys.